Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. Lee here, and today's video is about the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. I had not intended to do a video on this subject, and I didn't intend to buy any books, but surprise, surprise, I only bought 2 of these books because they were on the list and I read about them. But the more I started reading the list, I was like, wow, I really want to do a video about this, even though a lot of other people are as well. Anyway, so I am not going to cover all 16 of the books in this video. I will put a link in the description box to each of the books, and there are 3 of the books on this list that I don't have that I intend to buy from Blackwell's UK as soon as payday hits, and I will also annotate those down here. But of the 16 books on the long list, I have 7. Again, I only bought 2 because of the long list. There are 2 others that I bought that I did not know were on the long list until it came out, and I had bought them as soon as they came out, as soon as they were published, because I wanted to read them regardless. And sorry, I've got a little bit of sun going on here. It's still early morning. Not early morning, but late morning, and I've got the window open to get some fresh air in. Okay, so let's start. The first one that I have on the list, and these are in alphabetical order by author, is The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. I bought this last summer, I believe, and I just have not gotten around to reading it. I know it's got mixed reviews, but an individual I follow on Instagram and Storygraph, Bookish Gen Xer, said she enjoyed this, so I will let you know what I think about it as soon as I get to it. But here's what it's about. I think actually I did a book haul with this one last summer when I picked it up. In the near future, a civil servant is offered the salary of her dreams to work on a top secret project. A recently established government ministry is gathering expats from across history to establish whether time travel is feasible for the human body, but also for the fabric of space-time. She's tasked with working as a bridge, living with, assisting, and monitoring the expat known as 1847, or Commander Graham Gore. As far as history is concerned, Commander Gore died on Sir John Franklin's doomed 1845 expedition to the Arctic, so he's a little disoriented to be living with an unmarried woman who regularly shows her calves, surrounded by outlandish concepts such as washing machines, Spotify, and the collapse of the British Empire. But with an appetite for discovery, a 7-day cigarette habit, and the support of a charming and chaotic cast of fellow expats, he soon adjusts. Over the next year, what begins as an excruciatingly uncomfortable housemate dynamic evolves into something much deeper. By the time the true shape of the ministry's project comes to light, the bridge has fallen haphazardly, fervently in love, with consequences she never could have imagined. Forced to confront the choices that brought them together, the bridge must finally reckon with whether what she does next can change the future. So I am all about time travel. I particularly like time travel romances, and this seems to be a romance, but also falls in the sci-fi category. I think my cousin Victoria may have read this. I think she read it last year. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to this. I am trying to prioritize right now books by and about women for a lot of reasons. But this is one that, since it made this list, has been brought back to reminded me that I do want to read it sooner rather than later. See if I can move some books without pushing them all up. The next book on the list that I have is one that I did buy because the other day I was reading through the books on the long list, and I read descriptions of all of them, read first lines on all of them, and this one just spoke to me, and that is Karen Jennings' Crooked Seeds. I don't think I would have heard about this if it weren't on the long list, but they did have it in my Barnes & Noble. I probably wouldn't have picked it up. The cover doesn't really speak to me. It's very tiny. But this one I'll actually read you the first couple of lines when we get to that, because what spoke to me is how grungy it felt and how I love a flawed main character. Cape Town, 2028. The land cracks from a years-long drought, the nearby mountains threaten to burn, and the queue for the water trucks grows ever longer. In her crumbling corner of a public housing complex, Deidre Van Deventer receives a call from the South African police. Her family home, recently reclaimed by the government, has become the scene of a criminal investigation. Mystery. The remains of several bodies have just been unearthed from her land after decades underground. Detectives pepper Deidre with questions. Was your brother a member of a pro-apartheid group in the 90s? Is it true that he was building bombs as part of a terrorist plot? Deidre doesn't know the answers to the detectives' questions. All she knows is that she was denied, repeatedly, the life she felt she deserved. Overshadowed by her brother, then left behind by her daughter after she immigrated, Deidre must watch over her aging mother while the landscape around her grows more and more combustible. As alarming evidence from the investigation continues to surface and detectives pressure her to share what she knows of her family's disturbing past, Deidre must finally face her own shattered memories so that something better might emerge from her for her and her country. I've not read much, if anything, about South Africa, but like I said, the first few lines of this called me in because Deidre seems like a flawed heroine, and it spoke to me. She woke with the thirst already upon her, still in her clothes, cold from having slept on top of the covers. 2 days, 3, since she had last changed. The smell of her, overcast with sweat, fried food, cigarettes. Underwear stank strong enough that it reached her even before she moved to squat over an old plastic mixing bowl that lived beside the bed. So dark, gritty, it feels like a character that you might not like, but I have a feeling I'm going to be rooting for Deidre throughout this. This is one I plan to get to probably sooner than The Mystery of Time. Next up is a book I have had for quite some time. I picked it up on a whim. This book has gotten a lot of buzz, and yet I seem to feel hesitant to read it, probably because of the subject matter, and that is Miranda July's All Fours. I've no qualms with sex or anything like that. I'm just not sure if this is gonna resonate with me, but we'll see. A semi-famous artist announces her plan to drive cross-country from Los Angeles to New York City. 30 minutes after leaving her husband and child at home, she spontaneously exits the freeway, checks into a nondescript motel, and immerses herself in an entirely different journey. Miranda July's second novel confirms the brilliance of her unique approach to fiction. Okay, and then it just goes on talking about Miranda July. I'm hesitant because one of the people that I follow on YouTube, Greg, over at Supposedly Fun, said he had read something by Miranda July before, didn't like it, didn't intend to read this, and he and I tend to have similar taste in reading, so I'm just really hesitant. That said, there's some stuff he loved that I did not like, and there's some stuff he didn't like that I loved, so who knows. The next book is right up my alley. I picked this up because I was looking at what books were published that week, and I knew I wanted to pick up The Persians by Sanam Malouji. This, again, right up my alley. Meet the Valiant family. In Iran, there were somebodies. In America, they're nobodies. First, there is Elizabeth, the regal matriarch with the famously large nose, who remained in Tehran despite the revolution. She lives alone, but is sometimes visited by Niaz, her Islamic law-breaking granddaughter, who takes her partying with a side of purpose and yet manages to survive. Elizabeth's daughters wound up an American. Shireen, a charismatic and flamboyantly high-flying event planner in Houston who considers herself the family's future, and Seema, a dreamy idealist turned housewife languishing in the chaparral-filled hills of Los Angeles. And then there's the other granddaughter, Beta, a disillusioned law student in New York City trying to find deeper meaning by quietly giving away her belongings. When an annual vacation in Aspen goes wildly awry and Shireen ends up in jail, the family's upper-class veneer is cracked open. Shireen embarks upon a quest to restore the family name to its former glory. But what does that mean in a country where the Valiants never mattered? Can they bring in their old inheritance into a new tomorrow? I love this. It's a family saga that spans from the 1940s Iran to a splintered 2000s. And I am so looking forward to reading this. I love stuff about Iran and the Middle East and Afghanistan. So this is, again, right up my alley. Can't wait to read it. I just really look forward to that. I will read that sooner rather than later. And surprise, surprise, folks, we are coming up to a book that not only did I not buy for this, although I did buy it as soon as it was published, but one I've already read. There are two in this list that I've already read. First one is Nesting by Roshin. I looked up how to pronounce it, and I'm failing miserable. O'Donnell, I can pronounce that. I read this. This is going to be also will have been featured in my weekend books this week, where I will talk more about it. I finished this in one night. There are no tabs because I fell into the book and I just couldn't pull myself out enough to tab stuff or write in here. I admit, and I'll talk more about this again in my weekend books, sometimes I skimmed through this because it made me so anxious that I had to skim really fast through it so I could get to the other side of what was happening. On a bright spring afternoon, Kiara Faye makes a split-second decision that will change everything. Grabbing an armful of clothes off the clothesline, she straps her two young daughters into her car and drives away. Head spinning, all she knows for certain is that home is no longer safe, and that this time when she leaves, she must stay away. On the surface, she has a perfect life. Her sometimes kind and attentive husband, Ryan, is a good provider from a nice family, and they have another baby on the way. But he also monitors, I don't know if it's Sierra or Kiara, every move and flies into unpredictable rages in which he convinces her she can do nothing right and has isolated her from work, friends, and her beloved family. Was fleeing the right thing to do? With no job and no support, Kiara struggles to provide a sense of normalcy for her little girls. Facing a broken housing system, they move into a hotel room on the floor reserved for women like her, eating takeout, washing their clothes in the bathroom sink, and building a community with the other residents. Ryan, meanwhile, wages a relentless campaign to win her back, and Kiara wavers. He's never hit her after all. And don't the girls need a stable home and their father? It says, below this, it says suspenseful and all-consuming. Yes, this was suspenseful and all-consuming. I read it in an evening, so 3-4 hours, and I loved it. I don't think it's going to go up on my favorite of the year, but we'll see. One thing, though, that this book has me thinking about is refugees. Along with Prophet Song, the book I'm reading now, and The Safe Keep, which is also on the women's long list, by Yael van der Wooden, I'm thinking about refugees, and I'm in the mental stages of planning to do a post about refugees, and how difficult it is to leave your home. So, on the surface, The Safe Keep, this is the second book that I read that I had already read before the list came out. The Safe Keep doesn't appear to be related to that subject, but it is. And this is one of my favorite books that I read in 2024. I started the book and it was nice and it had a great pacing to it. And I thought, I'm just reading great lesbian lit fic. And then, record scratch. Yale Van Wooden flips the switch, and I was not prepared, but I was not prepared in the most lovely of ways. A house is a precious thing. It's 1961, and the rural Dutch province of Overijssel is quiet. Bomb craters have been filled, buildings reconstructed, and the war is well and truly over. Living alone in her late mother's country home, Isabel knows her life is as it should be, led by routine and discipline. But all is upended when her brother Louis delivers his graceless new girlfriend, Eva, at Isabel's doorstep as a guest there to stay for the season. Eva is Isabel's antithesis. She sleeps late, walks loudly through the house, and touches things she shouldn't. In response, Isabel develops a fury-fueled obsession, and when things start disappearing around the house, a spoon, a knife, a bowl, Isabel's suspicions begin to spiral. In the sweltering peak of summer, Isabel's paranoia gives way to infatuation, leading to a discovery that unravels all she has ever known. The war might not be well and truly over after all, and neither Eva nor the house in which the two women live are what they seem. Again, I absolutely loved this book. One of my favorite books that I read in 2024, and I highly recommend it. This was also on last year's Longlist for the Man Booker Prize. Ultimately, it did not win. I did not like the winner of last year's Booker Prize as much as I loved this book. So, finally, we're coming to book 7, and this is one that I bought because of the Longlist, the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist. When I read this, the blurb for this, as with Crooked Seeds, I was like, this is for me. And that is Nusaybah Yunus's Fundamentally. Ooh, different time periods possibly. It starts in 2019. This is one, again, I'm going to read sooner rather than later. When Nadia Amin, a witty and big-hearted PhD, publishes an article on methods for rehabilitating ISIS brides, everything changes. The United Nations comes calling with an opportunity to put her theory into practice and lead a de-radicalization program for ISIS-affiliated women. And why not? Abandoned by her mother and devastated by unrequited love, she leaps at the chance. In Iraq, Nadia quickly realizes she's in over her head. The UN is a mess of competing interests, and the Iraqi government has no intention of approving her program. Her team isn't much help. Under her command is Goody Two-Shoes Sherry, who never passes up an opportunity to remind Nadia of her objections, and Pierre, a snippy Frenchman who has no qualms about perpetually scrolling through Grindr. But then Nadia meets Sarah, a hilarious, foul-mouthed East Londoner who joined ISIS at just 15. The two are kindred spirits, and Nadia vows to get Sarah home. However, in Nadia's new, maddening world, nothing is as it seems. Success is determined by how well she can cozy up to corrupt ministers and screw over her rivals. As the de-radicalization program picks up traction, Sarah reveals a secret that upends everything, forcing Nadia to make a drastic choice. In the fallout, Nadia's brown savior fantasies crumble, leaving her to wonder if she can save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And I can't wait to read this. A book I don't have with me right now is the Women's Prize for Fiction winner of 2024, and that is Brotherless Night. I don't remember the author's name, but I am loving that book. It, too, makes me want to write about refugees, even though these individuals in this book aren't refugees. They're living in a state of civil war, as best I can see. Anywho, I am very excited to get to a lot of these books. In fact, it feels like I might like these books more than I liked the Booker Prize long list from last year. Anywho, if you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. If you have any opinions on any of these books or anything to say, I'd love to hear you in the comments. I'm going to call it for now because I've got chores to do. It's a lovely day. I've got my windows open. A cool breeze is flowing through. My cat's sitting at the window sniffing the air. So I'm going to only get a little bit of reading done today, but it is what it is. That's it for me. If you've made it this far, as always, thank you for sticking with me on my journey, and happy reading.